Hi, I'm Scott McLean from TranceMusicMastery.com. In this video, I will show you how Adam Sabo created a Pluck sound like the one heard in Hope, original mix by Arty. And the sound that Adam created sounds like this. Okay, let's get started. I'm going to walk through the MIDI clip first, and I'll play through it in a moment, but first let me just zoom in here. Let's get a quick read on the notes. In fact, I'm going to fold the MIDI display, and what that does, if you're not familiar with live, that just collapses the MIDI notes and so that it's only showing notes that are actually used by the sequence. So we have G2, G3, G4, A sharp 2, A sharp 3, and a D4, then a C3, C4, and E4, then a D3, D4, F4, and then this section is C, C, and E4, and then D, D, and F4, and then A2, A3, and C4, and then A sharp 2, A sharp 3, and D. And so now if I just play through the sequence, okay, now let's look at the sound map. And Adam Sabo says, 2 detuned square waves, 1 high octave and a lower octave saw waveform make up this sound. Good use of reverb and delay make the chord sound even bigger and thicker. So this patch uses 3 oscillators. Oscillator 1 is a dual square wave, Oscillator 2 single square wave, and Oscillator 3 is a single saw. Those are mixed together and flow into a filter configured as LP mid-drive with envelope 2 modulating the filter cutoff frequency with 0 attack, medium decay, sustain at 12.5% of maximum, and a medium release. Then that flows into an amplifier with the volume being modulated by envelope 1 with 0 attack, medium decay, sustain at 82.5% of maximum, and a medium release. And then that flows into the effects and to the main output. For the effects, we have an EQ1 with a bandpass filter giving a plus 1.5 dB boost near 400 Hz, another bandpass filter giving a plus 6.0 dB boost near 2 kHz, a high shelf filter with a plus 4.5 dB boost near 5.5 kHz. Then that flows into a compressor with a slow attack and slow release. And then to a delay, stereo left delay with 1/8 and right delay 1/4, and 27.5% dry wet mix, and then a reverb with approximately 2-second reverb tail and low dampening for a bright reverb, and then that flows to the main output. Okay, let's build this patch. And I'm starting from the initialized patch, so let's play the sequence as it is. Okay, so we want to start with Oscillator 1. We're going to just use the default values for the global section. And for Oscillator 1, we are going to change the stacking mode to dual so that we have 2 copies of the wave being generated by Oscillator 1. And for this, we're going to select a square wave. So let me load up a square wave. That will work. And now I'm going to detune Oscillator 1 and set detune to 4.5. When I loaded up the oscillator wave table, it reset my settings up here on Oscillator 1, so I need to change this back to dual. And then now I can set the detune amount to 4.5. So just a very subtle amount of detuning there, just to thicken it up a little bit. And then set the width to 75. And just to demonstrate this, let's go all the way to 100 and see how that sounds. So at 100 it was almost too wide, if you will. Now let's go to Oscillator 2. I'm going to add Oscillator 2 here. And Oscillator 2 is also going to be a square wave, so let's load that. And for this one we're going to set the tune up 1 octave, so set tune to 12 semitones. And bring the volume up to 124. Okay, next bring in Oscillator 3. And Oscillator 3, we're going to leave that as a saw wave. And we want to pitch that down 1 octave. So set tune to -12. And bring the volume level up to 120. So that provides some bottom end for this patch. Okay, that's it for the oscillator setup. Next, let's configure envelope 1. So I'm going to set the sustain level, bring that up to 82.5. And shorten the decay slightly to 42. And increase the release to 33. And then set the velocity to 0. Okay, next, to give this more plucky feel, we need to add a filter, so add VCF1. And for this, we're going to use the mid-drive filter. And let's just listen to how this LP Excite sounds, and then halfway through I'll change it to mid-drive. Okay, now bring the cutoff down to 42. And one thing I've noticed after reproducing each of these patches is typically with the filter cutoff, when it's modulated, it seems like Adam will lower it. It always seems that he'll bring the cutoff down to the point where it's just barely there. You can still barely hear the sound, or you can no longer hear the sound. And then he'll add some modulation and bring the modulation up to where it sounds like he wants it. So I'm going to just demonstrate that real quick. I'm going to bring this down to 42. See, we can still hear it just barely, okay? Now bring in ENV2 to modulate the cutoff frequency, and then increase the ENV2 amount. And here we brought it up to 88. And then for the sustain level, we're going to bring that down to 12.5. Bring the decay time down to 48.5. Bring the release up to 30.5. And bring the velocity down to 0. So now let's go and reset this ENV2 amount. Let's start over again. Set that to 0. And then bring it up to 88. But this time I'm going to bring it all the way up and then I'll bring it back down to 88 so we can get a feel for what the range is on this thing. Okay, so you can see at the higher level it just was too much. So next, that pretty much wraps up the oscillator and filter setup and modulator setup. So the next step is to add effects. And here we're going to add an EQ and apply a 1.5 dB boost with filter number 2 between 300 and 550 Hertz. And to increase that bandwidth, we're going to lower the resonance. And for filter 3, we want to increase that, giving a 6 dB boost between 1.75 and 3 kilohertz, probably right around, it looks like around 2.25 kilohertz. And then I'm also going to lower the resonance on that. And then with filter 4, apply a 4.5 dB boost with the high shelf at 5.5 kilohertz, slightly below 5.5 kilohertz. Okay, and let's check the main output level. We want to bring that down to compensate for this EQ boost here. We're going to bring that down to 28.37. And next, add a compressor. This will help accentuate the attack of the pluck. Set the type to smooth, and I'll set the threshold first, bringing it down negative 6.5. And then bring the compressor down to 90.5, the compressor mix. Set the attack. We're going to increase the attack. We want a relatively long attack and release. So I'm going to bring the attack up to 88. And set release to 85. And then we need to lower the output minus 4.5. Okay, so that's it for the compressor setup. Now let's set up the delay. We're going to set ratio to 50, which will give us half of this sync time here. Set the crossback to 0, set the feedback. I'll start that at 0. Go ahead and set the mix at 27.5. In fact, I'll go ahead and play through the sequence. I'll bring the mix up to 27.5 and the feedback up to 25.5. Okay, and then finally adding reverb. We want the dry amount to be 100 and the wet amount to be 42. So we're going to leave range at 75 and decrease feedback to 35.5. Dampening, we'll leave that where it is. For the speed, bring that down to 37, and the modulation, set that to 40.5. And that is the patch. I'll see you in the next video.